Did Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage just collapse? Explosive rumors are spreading right now, and some royal insiders say the situation behind the scenes could be worse than anyone expected. So what's really happening between Harry and Meghan? Let's break down the shocking signs everyone is talking about.
He is having a breakdown in real time. We see it. He is completely unable to hide the totally complex feelings that come to the fore every time he is in public with Meghan Markle. In some ways, he does despise his wife. It's not about love. It's not about affection. It's about ownership, and it's about showing the world who is in control. And he can't stand that, and he cannot pretend that he can put up with it anymore. She had a post-divorce plan that was being instigated very early on because I think she thought it would have happened by now. But he's in such a bad way already. I mean, can it really get any worse? Maybe, yes, given what that post-divorce book could contain. And of course, that is another huge risk for Prince Harry. If he pushes her too far, then he thinks, oh my God, what is she going to say? Heated questions that you want answered about the British royal family. Let's get straight into it. Michelle Foster, F9V, says, have a nice holiday, Dan, thank you. My question would be, what do you think will happen to Prince Harry when Meghan Markle dumps him and writes her divorce book? Well, he's in trouble, isn't he? He's in deep trouble now, Michelle, because he is having a breakdown in real time. We see it. He is completely unable to hide the totally complex feelings that come to the fore every time he is in public with Meghan Markle. In some ways, he does despise his wife. I mean, we saw that on the recent Middle Eastern tour when he was constantly rejecting her attempt at public displays of affection because he knows that what she's doing is like ownership. It's not about love. It's not about affection. It's about ownership, and it's about showing the world who is in control. And he can't stand that, and he cannot pretend that he can put up with it anymore. That is a really distinct change in tone. But, and this is a big but, Harry has gone all in with this woman, and he knows that. And he knows it's not simple to turn back the clock. And he knows that in lots of ways there is no going back. Look at the age of the children, the fact that she would retain custody of them, even after a divorce that was instigated by her. That's the way that the Californian system works. So many people were warning Harry, do not take these, well, at the time it was one child, Archie. Do not take Archie to California with this woman because you're never going to get him back. And then the divorce book, that is the most extraordinary development for me. Now, you know, for a long time, people like me were reporting that Meghan Markle had a plan. She had a post-divorce plan that was being instigated very early on because I think she thought it would have happened by now. Of course, I guess she didn't realize how much Harry was going to be trapped into this horrible new life as a Montecito miserable prisoner. But it was once Vanity Fair. You know, Vanity Fair, like a mainstream American publication which uses fact checkers and really will only report on things that are very much agreed by the establishment Hollywood consensus or the New York consensus. And it was once Vanity Fair, in that cover article on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, revealed that, yes, a post-divorce book was being pitched by Meghan Markle to publishers. And he still just accepted her lies. And the fact that she just brushed it off. Oh, no, it's all rubbish. And it's like, at that point, you know, he is so far gone because the warning signs are there. So look, once it happens, he will clearly be in a very bad way, but he's in such a bad way already. I mean, can it really get any worse? Maybe, yes, given what that post-divorce book could contain. And of course, that is another huge risk for Prince Harry. If he pushes her too far, then he thinks, oh my God, what is she going to say about me? So the whole situation is just a complete mess, but it is a mess of Harry's own making. And what I think will happen to him now is not some great welcome back, we love you. I think that's changed. I mean, do you remember a time when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was the great hero of the British public? He had fought in the Falklands War. He was viewed as being handsome and someone who was a real asset, not just to the British royal family, but to the monarchy. His behavior changed the way that we viewed him forever. And Harry's behavior changes the way that we view him forever. I do think there would be some people who would say, well, it was all down to Meghan Markle. And of course, to an extent, that is true. But Harry wrote those words in spare. Not literally, but, you know, he allowed those words written on his behalf in spare to go out. And I think for a lot of us, that was unforgivable with or without the influence of his wife. So what will happen to him? Well, maybe he would try and return more to the United Kingdom. We know he's already doing that. But would there be any great idea that he could retain his place in the British affections or go back to the type of YouGov polling that he once enjoyed? Where, remember, Harry was really the only living member of the British royal family able to outrank the late Queen in terms of the popularity stakes when she was still alive. So, no, what would happen to him? He'd probably spend more time here. He'd split his time and he'd hope to regain the affections of the British public. He'd obviously be a somewhat eligible bachelor, and there would very much be interest, of course, in his next girlfriend and whether he would make a big mistake. But do I think that he would return to any great role? No, because he has wasted the opportunity. And in some ways, and I'll say this for allies of Harry because I'm not an ally of Harry and I never have been, but in some ways, the saddest thing about the past few years is that Harry himself knew how important this time was. He said it himself. There was only this very small window when George was too young to really be seen as the future. That was the short period that Harry had, and he's blowing it. He's blowing it for a woman. But this is the true Harry. He's a nasty guy. So, you know, he is a nasty guy. Honestly, I know lots of you believe that Harry totally changed as a result of Meghan Markle. And of course, he became a lot worse because she empowered him. But he was not a nice guy. He never was, okay? He was always rude. He was always arrogant. He was always entitled. So much of this was an act. Anyway, let's move on to Marianne Pulteney 4096, who says, why is it so difficult for the monarchy to demand DNA tests on Meghan's children? So let me be very clear on this. Of course, the monarchy could make whatever demand they wanted, but it wouldn't be a demand that Harry and the two children had to fulfill. We know that Charles is never going to ask for that. He's never even expressed an interest in removing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in terms of their titles and in terms of the line of succession where Harry and the two children remain in. I think certainly when it comes to the children, maybe Harry too, certainly without the backup, I guess, the evidential backup that would be required by law for them to stay in the line of succession. But you say, why is it so difficult for the monarchy to demand DNA tests? Well, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, at the moment, the monarchy has no desire to do that because the monarchy is run by King Charles and he doesn't even want to go down that path. But let's park that. Let's say William comes to the throne and he did want to go down this path. Well, he can make the demand. He can make the demand. They don't have to agree to the demand. But obviously the assumption would be if they didn't agree to the demand that there was an issue in terms of the DNA, and William could then move to ask his Prime Minister to strip Harry and Meghan from the line of succession. But it's not simple in terms of how this is proven. I mean, you'll remember in the past, the way around this was that the serving Home Secretary used to attend every royal birth. And it didn't happen because, like so many modernizations, I guess the woke and the wet took over and thought, well, that's terrible. But no, it should always have happened because look at what Harry and Meghan have done. Or look at what they have potentially done. they have potentially misled the world and misled the British royal family, and they've been allowed to do so because the Home Secretary was not required to be at the birth, and the Home Secretary needed to see that baby, okay, and where that baby came from, and they didn't. So I would argue that woke and wet reversal of a policy which was in place to protect the line of succession should have been there and still should be there to avoid a potential cover-up like the one that we're seeing. Oh, sorry, Marianne, I've got really wound up now. You wound me up. But that's why it's difficult. Do you see what I'm saying? It's difficult for so many reasons. And it would have to be an act of parliament, of course, that did remove the children from the line of succession for whatever reason. But you know, as I have explained previously, William has his own plan as to how he can do this without having to go down the DNA path. Sally Waters, this is such an interesting question, Sally, and I'm really glad you asked it because I don't think people think about this enough. She writes, what if William was to decide he didn't want the top job? It's all too much. And just, Danielle, I really don't. That's not how the late Queen thought. She wasn't a woman who really countenanced her legacy all that much because she was about duty of the day, service every day of her life, but not thinking about what's going to happen after I'm gone. Really, she wasn't big on that. She wasn't. Like, she did want Andrew to be looked after, absolutely, but she also appreciated the reality of how the British monarchy works. As a hereditary monarchy, she knew that it would be Charles's monarchy and that she could only hope he would do the right thing by her second son. But I also believe that she thought Andrew was telling her the truth. I'm very confident of that, actually. I did a lot of reporting on this for a long time. I was the person who broke the story the morning after Andrew's catastrophic Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis, which we could all see had been a total disaster. And a source close to Andrew told me he was going with the Queen to church that morning, which was a usual thing on a Sunday morning. But he was going to church for a victory lap. He actually told the late Queen Elizabeth II that the interview had been a great success, that it had gone swimmingly. Now, maybe the late Queen at that moment thought that her son had done a good job, but I mean, she soon knew that wasn't the case, and we saw what happened afterwards. But, you know, there were messages that the late Queen sent to the world, and I think the biggest message where she was stressing to us all to believe in Andrew's innocence was when, at Prince Philip's memorial service, she needed someone to usher her down the aisle to her seat, and it was Andrew who did so. And lots of people at the time were trying to say, oh no, he was just the first available. No. That was her message to the world. She did believe Andrew was innocent. So no, I don't think she had any inkling what would happen. Obviously, the payoff to Virginia Giuffre, and I do think I think the payoff is a disaster. Don't get me wrong. I think the payoff is a terrible, terrible thing for the British royal family and for King Charles to have to deal with. But I also do believe that the payoff is nuanced, because the payoff was made specifically, and I remember I reported it at the time in a lot of detail. The payoff was made because of the Platinum Jubilee and because of the fact that the Platinum Jubilee could not be overshadowed by the idea of Andrew in court up against Virginia Giuffre in a civil court in the United States of America. But in hindsight, given what we know, given what was in the Epstein emails, I think the idea of fighting Giuffre in court would have been a fool's errand for Andrew, would have been a catastrophic mistake. So do I think the Queen had an inkling of how bad this would get? No, I don't. Actually, I really don't. Okay, MNY76 asks, if a senior member is dating, what kind of intelligence is done in advance to help ensure that the person has no skeletons in their past or potential concerns that could damage the crown? To be frank with you, MNY, nothing really. Nothing really. It doesn't operate in that way. Now, we saw with Meghan Markle that there were loads of members, senior members of the royal family who had great concerns about Meghan Markle because of not just what they'd heard about her or what they'd read about her or what people had reported of her behavior, but because of what they saw themselves. I mean, she didn't really hide it, but at the end of the day, there wasn't some big background check exercise that was done because there was not going to be any telling to Harry. So the members of the royal family tried their best. The late Queen Elizabeth said, please just slow down, Harry. Prince William said, please just slow down, Harry. He didn't want to listen. And to me, probably one of the passages in Spare, Harry's autobiography, that stands out more than most. And it's weird, it never got much coverage at the time. I think it's probably because it was more nuanced. I spoke about it a lot, but I guess it was not as dramatic as like the dog bowl fight that wasn't with Prince William or the horrible things he said about Camilla. But it was Harry in some detail recounting when he had to ask the late Queen Elizabeth permission to marry Meghan Markle, because that really was the last perfunctory way that the royal family could have stopped this marriage taking place. There was still this rule. And Harry makes it clear in the book, even when it was the late Queen, he didn't respect that. He didn't respect having to ask his grandmother. He thought it was anachronistic and something that was just really inappropriate for him to have to do. But he's very nervous about doing it, and he thinks about it a lot, and they're on a shoot, and he thinks that he's grabbing the late Queen at the right time. And her response is so underwhelming. It's basically like, yeah, I can't really stop you. Do what you want. And that is how she felt. She'd given up at that point. She knew control had been lost, and Harry didn't really take the lessons from his family, who were desperate for him not to rush into an engagement and a marriage. So is there any formal type of intelligence that's done? Not in a way that would have any realistic chance of changing the course of history. Okay, last question now from Kathleen Carter 7231, who asks, how will William and Kate prepare George, Charlotte and Louis for when their father becomes king? There hasn't been young children of a monarch in an extremely long time. And of course there hasn't. I think probably, even though she wasn't really a woman who reflected and did a lot of regrets, but probably the late Queen Elizabeth II, I imagine, would have regretted some of the early years where she very much did focus on travel and was separated from her children for a long period of time. And so, of course, what we have seen with William is that all of what he does as a dad is to try and give these three children as balanced a life as possible. Now, look, a lot of that is just because he's a great father, right? Like, I don't want to try and say, oh, he's putting them through some type of royal boot camp. It's not about that. It really isn't. I think William understands that the more balanced upbringing they have, which, let's be honest, is something that him and Harry never had. They never had it before Diana's death because the War of the Windsors completely dominated their early childhood, and it was nasty and toxic. So they never had it before. But they also never had it after, for obvious reasons, because they were grieving the loss of their mother, which was just so tragic on so many levels. And Charles was much more like his mother, actually, in terms of dedicating more time to the role, the job, than the family life. And so, again, William is criticized quite a lot by King Charles's team, even now. I think they call him 9 to 5 William, or, they've got silly nicknames and things like that. And it's like, no, he has his bottom lines, and his bottom lines are, we are going to, or him or Catherine, one of them, are going to drop the children at school, pick the children up from school. You hear that a lot, but it's true. And this is the preparation. So, Kathleen, that is my long answer to a short, direct question. That is the preparation. The preparation is every single day. He just wants to be a normal parent as much as possible because he thinks if these three grow up, I'm talking obviously about George, Charlotte, and Louis. Louis a bit more renegade, isn't he? It's cool to see. It's going to be fun. But, he wants them to understand what their role is, of course, but also wants them to grow up as balanced young people.
Royal Watchers. The story isn't over. Far from it. Rumours about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage are exploding. and every move they make could change the game. Are we witnessing the start of a royal breakup, or just another media frenzy? The truth is closer than you think, and the next chapter could shock the world. Tell me in the comments, do you think this marriage will survive the pressure, or is the collapse inevitable? Hit subscribe now, because the drama is only getting bigger, and you'll want to be here when it unfolds in real time.